So now let us discuss about the law on public officers. So we're going to, of course, when we speak of the law on public officers, this is usually the topic where we discuss the flow of what would be the route of a public officer from start to finish. Okay, so let's, of course, every public officer would start with this concept of appointment. So a public officer cannot hold office without appointment. Okay, so of course, appointment, you can look at appointment as there would be formalities when we speak of appointment. Okay, so what are the formalities of appointment? Okay, so when we speak of appointment as a formality, of course, the first one that's going to come into mind is the concept of the issuance of a commission. Because of course, if you can recall, the basic premise of an appointment is, of course, the president, okay, has this appointing power. Okay, if you can recall your constitutional provisions on appointment, the president has the leeway and discretion of assigning appointees, unless if it is prohibited or limited by law. But insofar as appointments are concerned, okay, the president has the leeway and the sound discretion to make its appointment. Okay, now when we speak of appointment, of course, as a formality, of course, so there is this issuance of a commission. So the appointing authority, okay, would issue that commission, assigning a particular officer who would be able to take the duties of the office. But of course, before accepting the commission, particularly if we're discussing about civil service laws, before a commission would be issued, there would always be this concept of a selection or a screening process. So under current CSE rules, okay, so the of course, the appointing authority, because your appointing authority, it can be the president, it can be the department, it can be the office, it can be the bureau. It depends on the capacity of that instrumentality or office to do such appointments. Okay, so before there is a commission, there would be a selection. So usually it will all first start in this concept of posting. So there would be a posting of vacancies. Then if someone would apply for the posting of vacancies, they're now going to have this selection. Of course, before they would do the interviews and other selection, the other mode of selection process, of course, they have to look upon the qualifications, the curriculum vitae of the applicants. Okay, so after they have filtered all of the applicants, of course, they're going to filter those who would pass the qualification standards. If you can recall, in order for an appointee, okay, would be able to be appointed, okay, there must be a determination if there is this compliance with the qualification standards imposed by the particular item or office or the plantilla. Okay, so for example, if your position is, for example, COMELEC provincial election supervisor, one of the requirements there is you should have at least X number years of service, and of course, you should be civil service eligible as a lawyer under RA 1080. Okay, because if you're a lawyer, if you're a lawyer or a professional under RA 1080, you don't really need to get a civil service examination. You're automatically considered as as qualified. But of course, it's clear in the qualification standards, it should be a lawyer under RA 1080. Okay, so in that case, that's the qualification to be done. So for example, there would be applications who would not comply with those standards. Of course, the appointing authority can exclude those applications. So they're now going to concentrate on those who would comply as to what their CV or their curriculum vitae would state. Now, after they select all of those appointments, they're now going to enter into this process. So sometimes this process is being done by a selection board. But so if you are in government, you might have heard the concept of a PSB or yung personnel selection board. So this personnel selection board is the one who's going to conduct the necessary steps to determine who to appoint. So sometimes they conduct examinations, Afterwards, they also conduct interviews. Okay, so usually it is done by the PSB. Now, after the PSB has done with their process, they're now going to select who is the most qualified. Now, of course, it would depend on how are they going to evaluate the interviews and all of the other standards. But at the end of the day, of course, it is the discretion of the PSB to select who to appoint. Okay. Now, after that's already chosen, of course, they have to ask the applicant if he's going to accept the office, because in theory the appointee can reject it or accept it, because if the appointee is going to accept it, no problem. But if the appointee is going to reject it, or if the appointee did not respond within 30 days, they're going to go back to those who are qualified. So they're going to select now who is next in qualified there among the ones that they screened again. So they're going to revert back to the selection that was already selected. Okay. Now, of course, in cases where no one really applied, or the example, there are applicants but all of them did not pass, they're just going to republish, or they're just going to post it again as a vacancy. Okay, so that's the concept of your appointment. Now, if everything's done, then the appointee now accepts the appointment. The commission will now be issued. So the commission is now going to be issued by that particular office or that appointing authority. Now, after that commission, of course, it's the formality now is that the public officer will now accept that commission. Then after that, there is this requirement of attestation on certain offices. There is a need for attestation. So, of course, you have the appointing authority. You have to attest it. When we speak of attest, you have to report that appointment with the Civil Service Commission main office. Okay? So we're going to submit that we already have this appointment. Okay? Then after that, the formality would be now, of course, aside from the oath, during this time, of course, the potential public officer would be required to comply with certain requirements like SALN, other identifications, usually for payroll purposes, all of that. So that's your and then after you comply with that, you're now going to take the oath. So when you take now the oath, you're now formally a public officer. Okay. Then, of course, we have the constitutional provisions. So, example, if your position is within the scope of what is stated in your constitution, okay? Like, for example, your Armed Forces of the Philippines member, na rank mo naval captain or colonel, or ambassador ka, okay, or cabinet secretary ka, technically, you have all now the formalities. Only that there is just one required formality when it comes to those officers. You need the confirmation of the Commission on Appointments. Okay? The reason why I initially parlayed this is because you have to consider now the concept of permanent and temporary appointment. Okay? So, of course, when we speak of the Constitution, those the ones classified there is your regular and ad interim appointment. Of course, the Constitution, we have regular appointments, those who have passed the Commission on Appointments. Then ad interim is basically an appointment where there is not yet a confirmation, but it is subject to the approval of the Commission on Appointments. Now, of course, when we speak now of permanent and temporary appointment, this is more or less a civil service concept. What's the necessity of determining permanent and temporary appointment? Of course, your permanent appointment, if you were appointed in an office, okay, example, you applied into an office, you passed through the personal selection board, you complied with all of the requirements, you passed, you took the oath. That's technically a permanent appointment because you qualified on all aspects, okay? All everything you were able to comply with it, okay? So that's a permanent appointment. Now there are cases where especially it depends on the office or the exigency of service, okay? Some appointing authorities make temporary appointments. So, if there is a need to appear to appoint someone because there is a need for this person to have a personnel in this, diba? So sometimes they need an OIC, okay? The appointing authority sometimes issues temporary appointments, okay? Note that in temporary appointments, the qualification there is you are just appointed there until and unless the most qualified officer is going to be appointed eventually, okay? So someone who accepted the temporary appointment is aware that it is temporary in nature. So what is the effect of that? The effect of that is more or less in relation to due process. Because if your appointment is permanent, you are covered by the concept of security of tenure. Okay? So when we speak of security of tenure, you cannot be terminated or you cannot be removed from service unless there is a compliance with due process. Okay? So that there is a need for due process considerations, okay, when it comes to permanent appointment. Temporary appointments, on the other hand, once the permanent appointee would now be appointed, your term would already be functus officio, okay? So, the temporary appointee cannot claim that he was deprived of due process if he is going to be kicked out or removed from the position, because automatically the temporary appointee is aware that he's going to be replaced anyway, okay? So that's the concept of your temporary appointee, okay? So now you have to note that it doesn't necessarily if the temporary appointee is also qualified. So for example, if a temporary appointee eventually become eligible, okay, is the person now automatically assigned to that office? The answer there is no, because insofar as creating a permanent appointment, that appointee should still go through the process of applying, being selected eventually, and be chosen, hopefully, okay? But even it doesn't mean that you're a temporary appointee, then eventually you got your qualification. It would not absorb that, because especially if you're going to look at the modes, how appointments are made in the CSC, there's really a process to be followed before there would be the filling up of a permanent vacancy, okay? Kaya nga sa civil service merong rules on appointments sa civil service, okay? So there is a unified and omnibus rule on appointments, okay? So nandun yung step by step niya na appointments, okay? I think naman nowadays, this is just an opinion. Well, nowadays, I think there's a lack of temporary appointees nowadays. Actually, there's a saturation of qualified personnel. It's just that sometimes the appointing authority does not really want to appoint yet, okay? Sometimes if there are offices which are, well, they are much reliant on contracts of services or job orders. Sometimes there is this notion that sometimes they don't fill up they do not want to fill the permanent positions, okay? So, well, of course that's their discretion, but of course I think there is a limitation that you should fill up those vacancies in due time, okay? You cannot just depend on contracts of services, okay? All right, so then of course, so what is now regular and ad interim appointment? So if you're going to recall the case of Matibag versus Benipayo, okay? So in Matibag versus Benipayo, there is a distinction. So a regular appointment is always a permanent appointment. An ad interim appointment is also a permanent appointment, okay? The only difference on the distinction on regular ad interim only lies to the requirement of the requirement of confirmation before the civil service. Okay? So, there is a distinction between, so when we speak of regular ad interim appointments, all are regular appointments. Okay. Now, of course, there was a confusion there in a sense because, of course, when we speak of ad interim, it's in the literary. If you're going to treat ad interim as literary, that's temporary in Latin in for all translation purposes. But for purposes of the law on public officers here in the Philippines, Matibag cited the old case of Summers versus Osaeta et al. Okay, so it stated there that that there is a distinct definition of ad interim here in our constitution and even in the old constitutions natin like the 1935 constitution. So when we speak of ad interim appointments, it's also permanent in character. Okay, it's permanent. There's just a condition or there's a sine qua non necessity that there should be an appointment there should be a confirmation before the commission on appointments. Okay, all right. Okay, then let's go to let's go to another topic. Okay, so of course, powers and duties of public officers. Of course, we know the distinction of ministerial versus discretionary power. Of course, when we speak of ministerial power, this is the office that is just have to do with the formalities. They do not have to question it. And of course, if that public office exercising ministerial functions would not comply, they might be susceptible for someone to file a petition for mandamus against them, because your petition for mandamus is designed to deal with with violation of offices which does not want to exercise ministerial duties. So, diba, if you can recall all your old cases, diba, ang paboritong old case diyan si Standard Oil, si Standard Oil versus Jaramillo. I think you discussed this in your property. Diba, sa Standard Oil versus Jaramillo, pinare-register yung real property as chattel mortgage. Siyempre, ayaw ng Registry of Deeds na i-register kasi sandali, hindi naman yung real property, personal property yan eh. Pero di ba sabi ng Supreme Court sa Standard Oil versus Jaramillo, hindi dapat questionin ni registry kasi ministerial sa part nila yung pagre-register. Now, whether or not there would be an opposition later on, it's up to the parties in dispute who would file the case in court. But of course, it is founded on, of course, the registry complying with the production of documents later on. Okay? So, pero pag pinasabing register yan. Hindi mo pwedeng questionin yan. Okay? Of course, you have to consider it with discretionary power. Of course, discretionary power entails the discretion or decisiveness on the part of the public officer. Okay? So, matagal nang di tinatanong sa bar, or if I cannot recall if this was asked in the bar. A question may be asked, what about judges? What is a judge? Is the power of the judge ministerial or discretionary in character? The answer there is it depends on what power. Okay? Because naturally, if a judge would decide on the merits of a case, that's discretionary, because that's the determination how that judge would determine the applicable law in order to grant or dismiss a case or to find a person guilty or acquit an accused. Okay? So, that's discretionary. But are there aspects of the powers and functions of the judge or the courts insofar as we're talking about, are there parts which are ministerial in character? The answer there is yes, they have ministerial functions. When would they have ministerial functions? They would just have ministerial functions if we now discuss about the number of days in which the judge would decide on a case. So remember, in your Article 8, Section 14-15, there is a requirement that the RTC judge or the lower court judge, be it RTC or MTC, has 90 days to decide. Now, if the judge has been sitting on the case for more than 90 days, an aggrieved party can file a petition for mandamus because it is ministerial on the part of the court to release a decision within that period of time. Okay? So that's your that's the multifaceted function of a judge. They can have ministerial, they can have discretionary function. Okay. All right. Now, we now go to duties of public officers. As long as the duties of the public officers is provided by law, the officers under that said office has no choice but to exercise their power. They cannot do it no less. Okay? So, if you can recall the cases of Gonzales versus Chavez and impliedly in the CPRA case against Attorney Acosta in regarding the CPRA provisions, okay? There is an emphasis that the officer cannot allege or choose, okay, the role that they're going to do, especially if it is specific. Remember in Gonzales versus Chavez does not wants to delegate some of the PCGG cases to a private prosecutor. Okay, the Supreme Court would have none of it. Sabi ng Supreme Court, that's the role of the Solicitor General to appear for cases before the state. You cannot refuse that. Okay? You cannot refuse or find justification of not handling that case. Same goes to the CPRA case against Attorney Acosta. Attorney Acosta is alleging that there might be conflict of interest dun sa Pau versus Pau. Pero sabi ng Supreme Court, hindi naman private law office yung PAO. Besides, the mandate of the PAO is under RA 9426. So, you should comply with that mandate that you should give access to the needy and the underprivileged. Diba? There is never that was stated in that law requires that the PAO can choose their clients. Diba? So, that's your So, if it's clear in the charter of your duties and responsibilities, the officers there cannot shirk from that responsibility. Okay? Alright, then of course we kind of going to pass by the Code of Ethical Standards for Public Officers. You have to note Section 5 of your RA 6713. So this has already been amplified by your Ease of Doing Business Act, okay? But yung Section 5 on RA 6713, that's still of course the general premise. Meron lang additional sa Ease of Doing Business Act depending on what government transaction is being discussed. Pero ano ba essence ng section nung Section 5? Kailangan sumagot yung public officer. Example, pinadalan ka ng sulat. I would like to blah 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 blah, okay? Hindi naman pwede na hindi mo sagutin 'yon. Kasi pag hindi mo sinagot 'yon, masasanction ka sa Section 5. May penal clause 'yan, okay? Not only a penal clause, you can not only that we're not talking about a penal clause, you can also be administratively liable, okay? So, if you are administratively liable, okay, so, hindi ka makakapalag, okay? So, you have to answer, okay? So, ngayon, ang government offices, they're now required to answer correspondence. Malinaw naman doon, I think it was discussed in Bueno versus Office of the Ombudsman. You need to comply with those answer periods, okay? Now, sa Ease of Doing Business Act, of course, aside dun sa mga zero contact policy, there are now particular na kailangan sumagot ka dun sa aside from sumagot ka dun sa correspondence, you should comply with the period of days, okay? Kaya nga sa Ease of Doing Business Act, there is now a requirement of a citizen's charter indicating all of how many minutes would such transaction will take place. Because if the transaction will take place in that particular recommended period of time, that can be a cause for an administrative liability against the public officers for not complying with the law, okay? So, yun yung feature ngayon ng So, sa Section 5, maraming nagpa-file ngayon yan. Actually, example, barangay captain, ayaw aksyonan yung kanilang kaso. Yung iba, nagpa-file ng kaso sa ombudsman or sa piskal. Kasi, they're being ignored eh. Okay? And sometimes the problem with these cases, this is mala prohibita. So, example, talaga inignore ka, it was proven that you ignored it, you might be liable for something, be it administrative or criminal in nature. Or, syempre, nature nito is a little bit borderline or not really borderline. It's really included as graft and corrupt. It can be a public officer transgression. Note that we have to distinguish, since we're here naman na, we have to distinguish between an ordinary private employee from a public officer. Of course, a private employee is covered by your labor laws, but of course, it's still private in nature. The affairs are private in nature. But you have to distinguish and differentiate it from a public officer or a public or an government employee. A government employee or a public officer, okay, is covered under your Article 11 Section 1, 'di ba? Sa accountability of public officers. Remember, public office is a public trust, okay? The public officer or government employee is encompassed by that constitutional provision, okay? So no ifs and buts, they're covered with that, okay? So you cannot do anything about it, okay? Now of course, we kind of discuss this. So of course, then we kind of jump to the concept of SALN. Okay, so when we speak of a SALN, of course, there should be a report on statement on assets and liabilities. Okay, so there is a requirement every year you should comply with the SALN. Now, what's the purpose of your SALN? Okay, the purpose of your SALN is to determine whether or not you have accumulated ill-gotten wealth. Okay, but in that process, it's just a tool to check on that, okay? So, if your omission in your SALN is not that much or not that fatal, okay? It does not necessarily mean that you have violated the rules on non-disclosure, okay? So, if you look at the case of, I think, the Plus versus Department of Finance, okay? May hindi dineclare lang yung si The Plus. So, may mga hindi siya dineclare na ilang properties na conjugal naman. May di siya dineclare na lumang kotse, all of that. So, noong una, sabi ng Department of Finance, dapat nag-comply ka, okay? Pero sabi ng Supreme Court, eventually, they reached the Supreme Court. Well, the Supreme Court said that, well, wala namang bad faith kay The Plus in not including that. Besides, it's not, all of those properties are not ill-gotten in nature. The purpose of your SALN is to determine whether or not there is an increase as to in relation to the lifestyle of that public officer. But if this just a minor omissions like this, like property, it's really conjugal eventually it's not that big. It was acquired. It can be discerned that it was acquired through the income of the officer or the government employee through the years. You can determine that it's possible. You cannot be liable for such, okay? Then of course in SALN, there is this right for you to correct. So there is this office under each office, okay? So there should be a review of when there would be a submission of SALN, government employees would have to give it through their officers. Now their officers would pass through this these officers is now required to give these SALNs to a review and compliance committee, which is under section 10 of your RA 6713. So what's the necessity of a review and compliance committee? It is needed because it would review first the SALN. Now, if they see that there might be clerical errors or there might be clerical corrections, okay, the one who executed the SALN would be given an opportunity to correct the same, okay. Now, if you fail to require the correction of the SALN, of course, any question beyond it might not be sustainable in the end, okay. So there must be a compliance with the review and compliance committee under section 10, okay? then of course, let's discuss about discipline. Okay, so I think you have heard the concept of clemency. So of course, if we go, of course, this discussion is near the this is near at home with this concept of termination of services. Now, in your Civil Service Commission, of course, there are grounds for the termination of services. It's in your Civil Service Laws and as amended by the Revised Administrative Code. Okay? But in the course of reading that, okay, and this is also adopted by the Supreme Court in their rule on discipline, okay? So, there is an opportunity, especially as in the civil service, you can see this in the RACs, in the Revised Rules on Discipline on Administrative Cases. The Supreme Court, they have their own disciplinary powers, okay? But this is more or less a bit similar, okay? But note that, especially sa Supreme Court, okay, there is this concept of clemency, okay? Paano tong clemency? The tribunal, or example, the Supreme Court, may find the public officer guilty and may be deemed as terminable, okay? So, ibig sabihin nun, yung act niya may be constitutive of grave misconduct, the penalty would be termination, okay? The penalty would be removal from office, okay? If that is the case, okay? If that is the case, removal from office, you can apply for judicial clemency or clemency. Paano 'yon? You have to plea with the authority to at least consider your case. So, you can present mitigating circumstances. Okay, like, example, the mitigating circumstances are listed in the CSC as well as the Supreme Court rules. But, of course, there are grounds like years of length of service, as a first-time offender, like that penalties. If that is the case, the Supreme Court or the hearing body would rule that, of course, they're still liable and subject to termination of our service. But because of the judicial clemency, the court would decide to mitigate the impact of the sentence. They might lessen it. So there are two cases that I have in mind. Of course, the first case was si INRE audit of branch 170 Nabotas City. Okay. So one of the judges there was found guilty of gross misconduct because, well, apparently he did not comply with the returns on the warrants, okay? So he was dismissed from initially it was ordered that he be dismissed from service. But, well, the judge applied for judicial clemency and was granted. So what happened was the Supreme Court determined in the decision that he's still liable for that misconduct and the punishment is termination for service. But because the Supreme Court now, because the petitioner presented certain requirements, like it was his first time to have this, he has remorse, he has been working in the government for X number of years, the Supreme Court considered that defense, okay? So they considered those factual circumstances and they lowered the sentence of and instead of the point is there is no lowering, the imposed penalty would still be dismissal, okay? But since there is a plea for clemency, the court applied that mitigated penalty, which is only 2 years. This one was also applied in the case of Oka versus Attorney Toledo. So what happened to Attorney Toledo? He was initially dismissed, okay, in the height of the pandemic. So he asked for a reconsideration. The Supreme Court by analogy adopted the previous case that I discussed, you see, INRE 170 Caloocan City, okay, judicial audit of in Malabon Pala City, okay? So they reiterated the ruling there. So they considered the fact that, of course, the Attorney Toledo has especially a loss of income, especially that the decision came out during the height of the pandemic and all of those other factors. They were considered, of course, his length of service. It was considered as a ground for judicial clemency. So, although it was ruled that he should be terminated for his transgression, the Supreme Court granted judicial clemency, just served 2 years, okay? So that's your judicial clemency. There is a similar provision in your civil service RACS. Okay, nasa RACS din yan eh. Okay, so then we have to consider discussion on prohibitions. Okay, remember ang dami mga prohibitions on public officers. Okay, now one particular prohibition is after you win the election, after you run an election, win or lose, you have 1 year to to sit it out before you get appointed again. Now in Macalino versus COA, what happened here was, well, after the person was run for a position, a few months later he was appointed. I mean, not appointed. He was brought to the government office. Now, of course, he cannot be appointed by way of the formalities like a commission. So what they did was they gave the person a contract of service. Okay? So when we speak of contract of service, technically, these are contracts allowed by the Commission on Audit to augment personnel. Okay? So it depends on the skill or qualification. You have to apply. They would have to be given a contract of service. Usually, contract of service is lumped in with the discussion on job orders. Of course, job orders refer to rank and file and menial duties, like you see this every day in your barangay. There are a lot of JOs. The traffic officers are JOs. Okay. Of course, contract of services, they are also contractual employees of government. But the difference, of course, when we speak of COS or contracts of services, these are more professional in character. Like lawyers can have a COS, accountant can have a COS appointment. It's more or less professional in character, okay? But in Macalino, of course, that's what they did. So he was given a contract of service. So the COA questioned that move, okay? So the Supreme Court held there that there is no distinction. Remember, there is a ban on appointments. It's clear in your constitution. It's also clear in civil service laws, okay? You cannot appoint someone who has run the election. You cannot appoint them within 1 year from running, okay? Does it include the COS? Well, the Supreme Court said that there is no distinction whether or not it's an appointment per se or a COS. What matters is there is a movement in the person, okay? There must be an appointment, okay? All right. So when you see a problem that involves a COS, then there's a ban on his appointment, you should uphold the ban, okay? You should uphold the ban there, okay? All right. Then of course, we also have this concept of invalidation. This is not yet asked in the bar, but what is an invalidation? So an invalidation is a process wherein, well, your appointment is valid from the start, okay? Especially even if it's permanent, you have a valid appointment. But sometimes there will be circumstances where the appointment may be invalidated or it loses its validity because of certain particular events. Well, one good example is, for example, balik tayo sa provincial election supervisor. So you know that a provincial election supervisor has as a qualification standard, you need to be a lawyer, okay? Now, let's say that the provincial election supervisor will be serving for 3-4 years, okay? All of a sudden, that provincial election supervisor got disbarred, okay? So, what will happen if the provincial election supervisor become disbarred, okay? Of course, he would lose now the qualification, because if you get disbarred, you cannot practice law, right? And since you cannot practice law, you will now be removed from your compliance with RA 1080, because you cannot practice law, okay? So if that is the case, if the CSC sees that that appointee is disbarred, okay, the CSC can now move for an invalidation it can now apply for invalidation of that appointment, because it lost its the appointee previously having qualification has been deemed less qualified now because of the subsequent events that had happened to him, that is, he got disbarred, okay? So that's that's a little bit explained in Civil Service Commission versus Cutao, okay? Then Then appointments, okay? So appointments, okay? Ay hindi, appointments. Termination of appointments. Okay. Of course, termination of appointments, resignation, okay? So note yung resignation you still have to be voluntary. So what you read in the case of Ortiz versus Comelec still stands, okay? If your resignation is not voluntary, okay, that might be a ground to question the due process done in the case, di ba? So kailangan mo ng voluntariness on the part of the resignation. Now, don't confuse yourself with Estrada versus Arroyo, because I think as it has been discussed there in this case, and it's impliedly said there that of course it's more of a political upheaval, okay, of President Estrada being out of power, okay? So don't confuse yourself with the main concept of resignation as being voluntary in character. So in case of relying on jurisprudence, you still go to Ortiz versus Comelec, okay? Then impeachment, of course, impeachment is a mode, I think, but of course in Cristina Corona, the case of Cristina Corona, there is already a clarification that of course there is a distinction between impeachment and removal. Because when we speak of removal per se, there might be a removal of privileges, especially if you're in civil service, okay? Your pensions might be removed or your benefits might be forfeited, okay? But in the impeachment process, there is no requirement of forfeiture. That is why in the Cristina Corona case, the Supreme Court granted full benefits to former Chief Justice Corona, because they found that all the Chief Justice Corona was removed. It does not include the removal of his privileges, okay? Under civil service, yung retirement benefits niya would still be retained, okay? All right. So then of course expiration ng term, okay? Ngayon, when we speak of expiration of term, there might be this concept of holdovers, okay? So I think yung holdover, you already heard this in your corporation code. Diba? Yung holdover, example, lumagpas na yung election terms ng mga board of directors, hindi kayo nag-election, may holdover capacity yung nakaupo pa rin until the next qualified successor arrives. Ngayon sa revised corporation code, iba naman hindi na allowed ang holdovers ngayon technically sa RCC. Pero sa government appointments, it's still applicable, okay? Yung concept of holdover, and it was applied recently during the last barangay elections, if you can recall. Diba, nangyari, diba? Dineclare nilang unconstitutional yung postponement ng elections, and going forward, no postponement of that kind will be made, okay? But of course, nagkaroon ng issue as to ano mangyari sa mga officers. So, nirule ng Supreme Court that holdovers, yung lahat ng officers after nag-lapse yung election. So, lahat ng mga barangay captains, holdovers. At saka yung mga kagawad before nagkaroon ng election. Now, anong magiging epekto nun? Kasi if you are on a term, okay, of course, walang problem. Your term is fixed, okay? But the problem with holdover is you have to wait until the next successor is qualified. Kaya diba, medyo nagkaroon ng konting gulo nung last barangay election, nung tapos na lahat. Kasi, dahil sabi ng Supreme Court, hold over yung mga barangay officials. So technically, kung example, natalo ka ng eleksyon, automatically, wala ka ng alis ka na sa pwesto. Wala ka nang hihintayin na parang 30 days grace period like may term. Kasi wala ka naman term to speak about Di ba? Matik na yung pag natalo ka, talo. Ngayon, walang problem yung nanalo. Yung nanalo, di-retain lang yung kanilang posisyon, di ba? Pero yung natalo, wala talaga silang magagawa. Alis sila. Kaya nga, di ba, ginawa ng DILG together with the COMELEC, they kind of organized transition committees, 'di ba? Para magkaroon ng smooth transition. Kasi dahil holdover, parang matik na lang. alis na talaga yung nakaupo, 'di ba? So yun yung effect ng holdover, okay? Once the candidate, the qualified candidate appears, okay, or has been elected, automatic na magsisis yung office yung holdover, okay? So then disqualifications, okay? So note that may mga disqualifications tayo. Remember, di ba, yung kanina diniscuss natin sa admin law yung about yung sa COMELEC. Okay, di ba? Note that in Quinto versus COMELEC, yung resolution niya, kasi yung main decision niya was otherwise Doon sa resolution to the MR, the Supreme Court held that an appointive official is deemed automatically resigned under Section 66 of your revised omnibus election code, okay? So you have to distinguish elective from appointive officials. Syempre appointive officials resign sila kasi baka magkaroon ng bias habang nakapwesto ka, magamit mo yung impluwensya mo. Pag elective official, well, fixed term kasi yan, di ba? Since fixed term siya, there's no need for the person to be automatically resigned. Okay, so yun yung distinction, okay? So yun, then there's it. So I think we kind of covered the law on public officers insofar as the important points are concerned, okay?